Guys, we're now at our next juncture. I to basically jump into this full heartedly. This is going to be the second half of the show. We're almost an hour in. That's why I'm putting timestamps in, all you listeners, because I know if you don't want to be here for the whole thing, you can be here for the breakdown right after this alert.
Warning. Spoiler alert. Warning. Spoiler alert. You have been warned.
Guys, I'm going to bust out the casting for this season. We're about to dive into each episode here, 8 episodes long. Cast starts with Winona Ryder. What? I think. Sorry, Nick. What?
I was going to say, when you start saying who they are and what they're from, I was going to throw in what people might know them from.
Oh, I mean, we can do that, but let's tighten up the cast a little bit, because you're going to give us Easter eggs in each episode. Okay. Hey, this is the 3rd season. It's a deep dive. Most people know who these people are at this point.
Roll that beautiful bean footage.
All right. Winona Ryder, guys. Joyce Byers, the mother
of Will Byers.
Oh, snap. David Harbour as Jim Hopper. And okay, I mean, if we're gonna give a little quick side tangent, yeah, David Harbour recently in the completely blockbuster bust failed Hellboy, and oh yes, also all 3 seasons of this show. And guess what? He's in what's that new movie he's in right now? Nerd card revoked.
I don't.
All I gotta say is I love the Hellboy remake. He did better than Ron Perlman for me.
A lot of people disagree with you. I haven't seen it, so I can't agree or disagree, Nick.
I can't disagree or agree. But...
Noah Schnapp as Will Byers. Millie Bobby Brown reprising her role as 11, a.k.a. L. Finn Wolfhard as Mike Wheeler. That kid's not only getting huge from puberty, but he's also growing in the film industry. Mm-hmm. He's going to make some flashback reoccurrences in It Chapter 2, the Stephen King remake. Anyway, moving forward. Gayton,
not Itch. It Chapter 2.
I said It. I didn't say Itch.
Itch.
You know what?
You fumbled it. It's okay.
You know what?
It happens.
We'll play back that beautiful footage. Gayton Matarazzo as Dustin Henderson. Caleb McLaughlin as Lucas Sinclair. Sadie Sink as our redheaded Maxine. Charlie Heaton as Jonathan Byers. Natalie Dreyer as Nancy Wheeler. John Keary.
Joe Keary.
God damn it.
Let's get ready to fumble.
Joe Keary as Steve Harrington himself, the bromance at Bay.
Yes.
And Dacre Montgomery as Billy, Maxine's stepbrother, Billy, a.k.a. the asshole.
And the Red Power Ranger.
And the Red Power Ranger from the latest film.
Which they're actually remaking Power Rangers with none of these people that played them.
Well, that's all hearsay. Let's come back to it at a later time in Nerd News, which is not this episode.
And we got some new and recurring characters?
We do have some new characters for Season 3. We have Maya Hawke as Robin Buckley, a.k.a. the daughter of Ethan Hawke and Uma Thurman. Anyone that didn't know that? Yeah, she's actually been in a couple things lately and in another movie coming up. Priya Ferguson as Erica Sinclair, the oddie, mouthy sister to Lucas.
She was annoying when we first saw her in this season, but I came very close to loving her at the end of this. It was awesome.
There's some redemption in her annoyance, absolutely.
Yeah.
Then we have Cara Bono as Karen Wheeler. She's kind of like Billy's
Stacey's mom?
little fantasy. Who?
Stacy's mom?
Nancy.
No. Stacy's mom has
got it going on. She's all I want.
Mrs. Robinson?
Oh my God.
There you go.
Sorry. I should not be leading this nostalgic bust. Okay. Brett Gelman, the returning Murray Bauman investigator, conspiracy theorist, hater, of Russians.
Wisecracking, smart-ass news reporter.
A handful of additional recurring characters, just quick list off. We do have the science teacher, Mr. Clark, Randy Havens, returning for, sadly, only one episode, but we do get to see him again. Carrie Elwes, or Elves, or Ools, as Mayor
It's
Larry
Carrie Elwes.
Klein. Ugh. Andrew
Andre
Ivchenko.
Russian,
It's Grigory.
as Gregory. Ms. Doris Driscoll by Peggy Miley. And Francesca Reale. I am so bad with names. I usually check
all
up
good.
on these.
Francesca
She
Reale.
plays Heather Holloway, the lifeguard co-worker to Billy. All right, guys. I'm going to list out the plot. Nick's going to give out some Easter eggs. We're going to give our general thoughts per episode and keep moving on. What's up, Nick?
I'll hold up my finger when I got an Easter egg for you.
All right. So you want me to just go bullet point, and you'll hold up your finger when you want to spit out an Easter egg?
Rocked Casbah.
All right, guys. Chapter 1 starts with Susie, do you copy? We get a very specific date here, guys. A little bit of a flashback scene on June 28th, 1984, which ironically is only a couple months before Season 2 starts. So that's kind of give you a little context, because this happened during Halloween of Season 2 last year. That's when the season took place. Now we got a flashback to summer of 84, where a Soviet general gives a group of scientists a year to develop technology to force open a portal to the Upside Down. Finger 1. Nick, go.
They actually did this in a very clever nod to a film that came out in the summer of 84 called Red Dawn, which happens to be about the Russians invading the U.S.
Yes, this is not only Hollywood historical, but it's also very politically topical.
Yes.
And another Easter egg to go along with that, in that opening scene, something happens and the tall Russian guy is not happy with it, and very Darth Vader-esque chokes the living snot out of one of the scientists. And they actually modeled it directly after A New Hope scene in the beginning when Darth Vader chokes
one of the
French captain.
Yeah, one of the captains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is a lot of 80s movie callbacks throughout, as you guys will notice as we read through this.
There's definitely.
Moving on, Nick.
Go ahead.
All right. A year later, summer of 85. In Hawkins, the new Starcourt Mall has caused other town shops to close down, angering townspeople. Now, I could read through the rest of this, and then you could give me the mall. You want to wait for that? Because there's a lot of hits. Yep. Okay. Guys, a lot of callbacks, a lot of pop culture references, but we'll finish the plot here. Mike
Go
and
for the plot of episode 1, and I'll go through Easter eggs I have for episode 1.
Okay. Mike and Eleven have developed a romantic relationship, and Hopper talks to Joyce, seeking advice on how to split the two apart, because he's not having it. She suggests he write a heart-to-heart speech for Eleven, obviously a bit of a challenge for the masculine sheriff of the town. Dustin comes back from summer science camp and encourages Mike, Will, Lucas, Eleven, and Max to help set up a makeshift radio so he can contact Susie, a girl he met at camp. We'll break that down in a minute. One night, the power goes out across Hawkins, which shakes Will, and at a nearby abandoned steel mill, a strange entity appears. Meanwhile, Nancy has started a job at the local paper under editor Tom Holloway and co-worker Bruce. She secures a tip about a strange event, and then to cap off the episode, Dustin records a strange transmission coming through his transmitter of a man speaking Russian. So we'll break down our thoughts in a second on this episode, Nick, but give us some of your callbacks. What do we got on this episode here?
Well, the tall Russian guy, the baddie, that you see in the beginning is actually modeled after our very own Arnold Schwarzenegger, who starred in his movie The Terminator in 1984. And his mannerisms, the way he is, the way he moves around, the whole biker mantra he kind of has throughout the whole thing, it's very Terminator. He's to the point, and that's what he is. They built him directly off the Terminator. Now, you said Dustin comes back from science camp. Well, here's another Star Wars reference. As he's coming back, Dustin returns, and as he's coming through, he says on the radio, "Gold Leader returning to base." Can anyone remember what that's from?
Yes, that's the Death Star trench run from Episode 4.
No, Battle of Endor.
Sorry.
1983, Return of the Jedi. Lando Calrissian. That's his call sign, Gold Leader.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the mall, as you're talking about, there's a few things going on there. A lot of things are pointed to let us know exactly what time it is, and they kept very time accurate for it. The kids are sneaking into a screening of George A. Romero's Day of the Dead, which came out in the end of June '85. And another reason why they probably highlighted that is the composer John Harrison's score for the film was a big inspiration for the Stranger Things theme.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Their music. And then as you're going through the theater, as you see them walk by, you see Cocoon and Back to the Future. Both came out in '85, right there. Now, 11, Millie Bobby Brown.
Mm-hmm.
You actually see her room, and they don't make a pop culture reference. They make a reference to what's going on now, which I'm completely okay with. But they called back to what she's doing. If you look in her room, on the wall, you see pictures of dinosaurs and butterflies. And the way they're set up on there, they strangely reminiscent of Godzilla and Mothra. And they did this on purpose to highlight what that film was for her. And she had just done for this. The Duffer Brothers were very proud of what she had gone from going through from their film to that.
Yeah, 'cause she co-stars in that movie.
Yep. In this first episode, we see clear callbacks to Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yes.
When you first see Billy in this episode, you see Billy come out of the pool with the song "Moving in Stereo" by the Cars being played. Now, in this part, there was a dream sequence in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, and the person coming out of the pool was actually her character, played by Phoebe Cates, who everyone says that Susie, what's her name?
Dustin claims
Dustin's girl looks like. But that same song was playing, and it was just a gender swap of the same role. He moved and came out the same way, everything. Another thing you see here is his car. His car is an exact model of the '79 Camaro from Fast Times at Ridgemont High.
lots of callbacks here.
Mm-hmm. And you see, this is the first glimpse you see at the poolside. What's her name? Karen. The mother, Nancy's mother. Karen sitting by the pool drinking a can of a very infamous drink that was such a flop, people asked for them to go back to the original recipe. It was a can of New Coke.
Oh, New Coke.
Yep.
Yes, New Coke, which, by the way, was a little bit more sugary and tasted awful, because I actually bought the stuff from the... Anyways.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah,
the last one for this, if you look as the new entities there, you see rats flocking. Just a whole bunch of rats in the basement going through. This is a callback to 1970s Stephen King's short of Graveyard Shift. Mutating rats would eat people and stuff like that.
Oh, snap. Is that it for references?
That's it for references for episode 1.
Guys, overall, episode 1. Now, I didn't give any negatives in the review, and I guess I meant to post at least one, but I want to say probably the least. I think there's some good aspects about this small arc within the story, but it was probably the weakest of all the character developments, and that was just Nancy's Nancy and Jonathan's growth was minimal in the season. If I was going to complain about anything, it still had some intriguing aspects of the time and era. Example, Nancy and Jonathan both getting a job at this newspaper company. She wants to be a journalist or a reporter, and it's basically a male-led industry at this point in time. And she's just the coffee girl, just the person that goes and gets their lunches and their coffee. And it's very showcased here that of her general mistreatment, them poking fun at her, trying to take initiative about stories that's interesting, and there's just a little bit of development here, nothing too heavy yet. But that's something I noticed right off the bat, is that she's in a man's industry here, where she's working under Tom Holloway, and where they mention her coworker Bruce. Both guys are like complete douchebags to her in this. Just the first few minutes of the scene where they show her there. The makeshift radio, the callback thing, I thought that was fun. And I think it's hilarious. Even though he doesn't have bro chops, Dustin still gets berated by his bros, like, where they don't completely believe in this girlfriend that he met at camp. And he calls her as hot as, what was that from Ridgemont High reference? Yeah. He says it's like her, only hotter, and it's like none of them believe it at this point. So I love all of that. Yeah, I don't know. I loved episode 1. What did you guys think overall, episode 1?
I'm right there with you. I liked it. It was a nice dip your toes in the water start for the season.
It kind of brought back the fun of the friendships right at the beginning. Matthew?
Yeah. I would have to say, like, all the music for this first episode was on point. Like, you had Hot Blooded playing when Mrs. Wheeler was swimming in the pool. Billy was looking on. You got Nancy rushing into the freaking work with Working for a Living by Huey Lewis.
Yeah, that's the other thing that that this season just amplified even more than season 2, is just all the context-heavy songs. Not just because they were massive hits, but everything was like literally the words to every song was like literally hitting on the beats of whatever the plots were.
Yeah, and then like Hopper being mad at Elle and Mike kissing. And Mike playing the song in the background, Can't Fight This Feeling Anymore, by REO Speedwagon.
Yeah.
This episode brought our first flub, too.
All right, throw it out there.
First flub. Nancy Wheeler's car is a 1988 Volkswagen Cabrio.
Yep.
Oh, snap. Here we go, right in episode 1. And I forgot to cap the episode. I forgot the cliffhanger scene was actually Billy later drives by the mill, the paper mill. He hits something, gets out of his car, and then finds himself dragged inside the paper mill by some unknown entity. That was actually kind of like the cliffhanger scene. I forgot to mention that. Also, quick little like topical moment where Dustin didn't he present the Russian transmission recording, or was that not? That's further on. Huh? I might be jumping ahead.
This is when he caught it.
Okay, all right. Let's jump into chapter 2.
And then he kind of does that whole holy smokes type thing.
Right, and he realizes it's Russian speak. Okay, chapter 2.
On his radio, that he in fact calls Cerebro. Nice call,
right?
Over to X-Men.
Yeah, that was cool.
Sorry, I was just thinking about Steve and Dustin with the whole like lightsaber scene.
Okay, that comes in, I think,
Yeah,
in
it comes in
episode 2
later.
here. So
Yeah.
let's jump in. No, I love that too.
2.
Yeah. Chapter 2, the Mall Rats, which in and of itself didn't come out in the 80s, I don't think, but it is still a reference to pop culture, and Kevin Smith is a huge pop culture proponent, and one of his earliest films is Mallrats. So this is kind of a callback to that, not era specific exactly, but
Still a good movie though.
still a fantastic movie, and it's all about pop culture and conversation at the mall.
Let's go to the
Mall. Billy is dragged into the Upside Down, where he encounters his doppelganger. This was interesting, but we'll dive into that in a second. Instead of having a heart-to-heart, Hopper tries to distance Mike from Eleven. That's an understatement. Later, Eleven and Max run into Mike, Will, and Lucas at the mall, where Eleven breaks up with Mike. Another thing to unwrap there. Moving on, Nancy and Jonathan follow up on their lead and find Miss Driscoll had caught a rat that was eating her new fertilizer. When they're not looking, the rat implodes into an amorphous organic mass and escapes. That was interesting. Hopper asks Joyce on a date, but she gets caught up in discovering why all the magnets lost their magnetism and misses the dinner. And this is our teacher, Mr. Clark, encounter. Dustin, with the help of Steve and his coworker Robin, translate the Russian sentence. Steve discovers that the song Daisy Bell, heard in the background of the Russian message, is identical to the music played from a toy horse in the originated locally rather than from Russia. Meanwhile, wrapping this episode up, Billy struggles with nightmares during lifeguard duty, and guided by a strange voice connected to his doppelganger he saw in the Upside Down, he abducts fellow lifeguard Heather Holloway and takes her to the mill to be possessed by the entity there. Further unfoldings. Guys, how do you want to do this? You want to just let's unpack this a little bit, or do you want to list off the references for this episode?
Let's go ahead and unpack it, and then I'll do some references.
Okay. All right. Right off the back, Billy getting dragged down, sees his doppelganger. I was like, this is different. This is something we haven't seen in any of the previous seasons. A literal copy of himself in the Upside Down. And so I was left... What?
Not one, but many.
Well, was it an army of himself? I didn't think so. I thought it was a bunch of people.
One of him and everyone else was different people.
Yeah, it was just one of him.
No, it looked like a bunch of him.
Shall I cue up the scene? Because
Yeah.
I'm very...
Please do.
All right.
Probably on your phone so your computer don't crash.
Oh, it's fine.
I'm joking.
I mean,
No, he's not.
hold on.
I do see a couple of women in there.
There's different shapes, so I don't know if they ever show any clarity. But you see, yeah, there's a random assortment of clothing types. And that's all you see. But you do see some trench coats and some others in the shadows.
I could have sworn I saw more
I'm pretty
than
sure they're
one.
different people that have been taken by the Mind Flayer.
Yeah.
But at that point, he only taken him.
No.
Just because
Not
this
necessarily.
some people have been taken this time doesn't mean it hasn't happened in the past.
This is... Here's the thing.
That's true.
No, consider this. As of December, when he spit up the slug, or when they burned it out of Will, there's been almost an entire... At least 6 months of time has gone by where that entity has been rummaging around.
Yeah, true.
There's 6 months that this has been going on before we're led to the character that connects to the kids, which is Billy.
I could have swore like it goes back to that scene, and it's a bunch of him.
I
don't.
I know. I get the idea or what the thought is behind that happening, but yeah, we'll explore it later.
I'm gonna have to
But-
rewatch it now.
Bottom line, moving on. So we see the doppelganger. That in itself is different and unusual for what we've known from the Upside Down up to this point. The heart-to-heart Hopper just being overly protective of Eleven, and Joyce gave him advice, and he couldn't do it. And in between these bullet points, he basically comes up with a lie to get Mike to get out of the house. He says he's going to drive Mike home, saying that his Nana's sick, which was a lie. And then he just kind of flips on him and threatens him and says, if you keep your distance, then I'll consider allowing you to date my daughter. Because at this point, Hopper's, adopted 11 and literally adopted and figuratively has become a father to her at this point.
Right.
Yeah, I thought that was funny. Moving on, Mike, the next day, kind of a little filling in the gaps here. 11 calls Mike, and then Mike makes an excuse because now Mike's afraid of Hopper. So he's like, yeah, my Nana's sick, blah, blah, blah. And then later that day, they run into each other at the mall. Meanwhile, the boys are like Lucas is trying to give advice to Mike, saying, no, it's all right. Me and Max have broken up multiple times. She always takes me back. And so he tries to give Mike some advice on what kind of present or apology he could make to win 11 back.
Right.
And then 11 straight up dumps his butt at the mall. And they're like, that's like next level, like, oh, this is real.
Did anyone else find it funny that he's like, I tried buying you something, but it's hard. I only got $350.
Right.
$350? The $350 meme?
Yes, I've seen the meme, and that's, some people ask me, is this important? I'm like, yes, watch the show.
And $350 back in the day, you could actually buy quite a bit of stuff, or at least something at least decent.
You could buy a lot of casual, everyday things,
But they were looking in the wrong places because they were looking at like
jewelry and stuff,
diamonds. That are like,
well, and that guy said,
what
was it, $300? And Mike's like, they're all like, as they're walking, 300. I don't got that kind of money.
Yeah,
and that's like, it's like several hundred, like today, or $1,000 ring, basically. It's
and going on with the whole 11 dumping him. As soon as he dumps her, or she dumps him, Cold as Ice comes on by Foreigner.
You're as cold as ice.
I gotta throw this out there real quick, Matthew. Shout out to our one nerd host that couldn't join us. Lynn has just been has had to work a lot lately and hasn't been able to catch up with the show. So he gave us his blessing to do this episode without him. But
hopefully he doesn't watch this.
But no, he knows what we're doing here. But my point is that last deep dive, he was responsible for jotting down all the music references.
Oh,
and so far, I'm giving you props, dude. I'm saying without a beat, you're very aware of all the songs that have come up. Like, you keep referencing them. I'm giving you props here.
I just like 80s music.
Well, no, I mean, Lynn knew a lot of them too, but I'm just saying, like, he was the guy designated to, like, spiel out any references, and you're just casually throwing them in there, and I'm saying I appreciate you. Moving on. Don't get a big head. Yeah. Moving on.
I already have a big head.
Nancy,
you were very weirdly
that's not my
filling
fault. Anyway, so guys, Nancy and Jonathan find Mrs. Driscoll in the basement going psycho munchies on the fertilizer. And it's pretty messed up looking. She's clearly affected. And so they're definitely onto something, First with the rats, and now...
Hey, bud, you're jumping into episode 3.
Nancy and Jonathan follow up on their lead of Mrs. Driscoll had caught a rat eating fertilizer when they're not looking. A rat.
Yeah, you were talking about...
God dang it, let me cut that out. Not that it matters. Yes, it is out of order, but that's... Oh my god. Anyway...
It's okay.
Okay, rewind. So anyway, guys, Nancy and Jonathan follow up their lead about Mrs. Driscoll claiming that there were some psychotic rats. And they find this rat just going crazy nuts in this cage. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, the audience is treated to what happens to the rat after our characters leave. And next thing we know, the rat implodes into a sticky goo that seems to be amorphous and alive and kind of leaves the place. It's kind of like, okay, what's going on here? Right?
Yeah, it's basically like it served its purpose, and all of a sudden it explodes, and then it's like, all right, I'm coming home, Papa.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah, it was kind of disgusting. Not gonna lie. Pretty sure I threw up at that moment.
On the in-between here, Hopper, now, I mean,
Being all Twitter-pated.
so, no, sorry, I'm drawing blanks. Bob Newby.
Yes.
R.I.P. Rest in peace, Bob Newby. Now that he's out of the picture, the super safe nerd that Joyce Byers got into a relationship with,
Played by
Hopper.
Sean Astin.
Sean Astin, yep.
Rudy,
Hopper's
Rudy.
kind of looking at trying to slide in there and ask her out on a date at least. And if you guys recall from season 1, they used to smoke cigarettes out in the schoolyard, you know. They used to go to high school together, Hopper and Joyce. So Hopper's kind of always sort of had a thing for Joyce, but just, you know, never stepped in or never thought about trying. And, you know, now this kind of seems to be where he's thinking maybe, why not kind of a situation. But...
It stems from the whole like conversation that he had with Mike, and he's all feeling good and happy-go-lucky that he like did something about that, and then all of a sudden he's like seeing her like, okay, let's test the waters here, kind of a thing.
Yeah, I mean, he kind of had a thing for her when she was with Bob Newby in season 2, but obviously, okay, he can't step in at that point. Meanwhile, Joyce, who's familiar with the craziness of Hawkins, jumps right into this concern about the magnets losing their magnetism all of a sudden, and she knows something's up. She can't put her finger on it, but I mean, she went through the first 2 seasons of Hawkins being invaded by supernatural crap and government conspiracy things that she's like, what could this be? So who does she seek? And I smiled ear to ear when I saw who this guy was building a miniature train set in his garage. I'm like, oh, Mr. Clark is back.
And wasn't a train set.
He was also listening to Weird Al Yankovic really loud.
My baloney.
Yeah.
Okay. On a side note, Nick,
that
there
part
is a train set amongst all the miniatures he's building.
Yes, but what he's built is a replica to scale of the town of Hawkins.
Yes.
Yes.
You didn't have to shut me down about a train set. There was miniatures surrounding the whole thing.
I didn't mean to. I'm sorry.
God. This guy.
Choo, choo.
Oh. Because that's actually an Easter egg.
Okay, well, fair enough.
Let's call back to Doc Brown.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Back to the Future. So, he explains how a massive source of electromagnetic fields could cause the demagnetization of said things.
Right.
And then that gets her going, wheels start turning. Meanwhile, coolest character I think this season, at least that I've enjoyed, is just this nobody chick that Steve starts working with at what was it? Chips Ahoy.
Chips Ahoy.
Was it Chips Ahoy.
Scoops
Ahoy. It was Scoops Ahoy.
I thought it was Chips Ahoy.
Well, Chips Ahoy is an actual brand.
Scoops Ahoy. That's right. My bad.
Ice cream shop.
Sorry, guys.
Scoops Ahoy. Robin, just kind of like a nobody. She thinks Steve's a complete loser. She's keeping track. He's trying to do his faux pas lady whatever, magnetism thing at every girl that comes up to buy some ice cream, and he fails every single time. And he feels like he's lost his mojo after coming out of high school, and he's like, I don't understand what's wrong. And she's got this loser board of how many times he just keeps losing.
Yes.
And And so I think it's a really sweet character. She's super smart because while Dustin and Steve are trying to decode this Russian message with a freaking Russian English dictionary, like Robin comes in there out of nowhere and it's like, I could probably figure it out. Basically, like she's bored of scooping ice cream and wants something interesting to do, so she helps him out because she already knows 3 other freaking languages or whatever, so she's super smart. And goes in there and starts deciphering that crap. Later in the episode, as they're closing up the mall, they walk by this coin-operated like horse,
Mm-hmm.
and they hear the music, and Steve realizes that it's the same music playing in the background to this Russian message. So then they start putting the pieces together, and they realize, okay, all these codes have something to do with here, and it came from here in the mall somewhere.
Yeah, and you could see Steve like go like, why does that song sound so familiar? Like I can't place that song. And then once they hit that spot, he's like, "Oh, give me a quarter. One of you got to give me a quarter."
And Robin just thinks he's an idiot.
And he starts playing it, and Justin's like, or Dustin. Why did I say Justin? Oh, my Lanta. Dustin's all like, "Oh, that's the music in the background of this." He's like, "Yeah, this message was from here, not from Russia."
Mm-hmm.
Like, it was just, yeah. It was cool, though.
I don't remember the beat for beats, but the last, portion of this episode, we kind of focus on Billy returning to his lifeguard duties. And everyone kind of looks at him weird because he's very much not himself. His normal self, he's cocky, proud, shirtless, and here we have a bloodshot, sweaty-faced, fully clothed version of Billy, where he just kind of looks upset and sick. He goes and sits down, and people are just kind of looking at him. And at some point, he gets up off his thing, mid-shift, and goes back into the locker room. Or no, he goes to a shower and starts running a shower, because he's just
cold shower.
Cold shower because he's just sweating up a storm. And then Holloway's daughter Heather, his coworker and lifeguard buddy, goes in there and asks if he's okay. And next thing you know, he's knocking her out, dude. I was like, "Whoa!"
Well, you hear a voice say, "Take her," in the background.
Take her.
Yep.
Very creepy. And I mean, that's that. Basically, he takes her, and at this point, we're kind of very suspicious. At this point, this early on, episode 2, we're like, "Oh, the mind flayer's got some kind of grip on this Mr. Belly. Like, where something's wrong here." Very reminiscent of what went on with what's his name?
Will.
Same thing going on here. Nick, any references you want to throw out there?
Quite a few.
Okay.
Well, we're going to start from the beginning of the episode. In the beginning, you see Billy taken by the creature. And when it actually finally gets him, you see this thing come up and attach to his face. It's a reference directly to the facehuggers from Aliens.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Came out in the 80s. And then later, you find out that several people in Hawkins have gone missing, and they're being taken over by the Mind Flayer. So, along with the Russians and everything there, the movie that came out in the 80s, there was a Invasion of the Body Snatchers.
Oh, yes.
And it was all a big representation of America's fear of the Soviet invasion.
Okay.
And it was embodied through the Body Snatchers because everyone thought everyone else was the spy for the Ruskies. Okay. All right. Now we flash forward to where 11 knocks on Max's door, and you're now in Max's bedroom. and they're talking, and she's basically telling him, hey, he's being a dirtbag, dump his ass. But something of note there, while you're in Max's room, you find out she's kind of a nerd and a movie buff, just like the rest of the kids. On her wall, you see a poster of 1982 John Carpenter's The Thing.
Right.
This is actually a nod to the plot of this season, because after all, The Thing is a parasitic creature that takes over the bodies of everyone around him. Yeah? A little bit of foreshadowing. This episode is also the episode where we meet our mayor, our dastardly Mayor Larry Klein, played by Carrie Elwes. And I love the choice for Carrie Elwes. He's an awesome actor. I love the way he approaches things. Every time I see him, I just see him rolling down the hill yelling, "As you wish."
I just see him cutting off his ankle.
Yeah, he gets his first name, his mannerisms, and his propensity to come up with distracting events for the town people from another mayor. He is actually modeled after Mayor Larry Vaughn from the Jaws movies.
I can see that.
Other Jaws movie reference. You actually see Chief Hopper quote Chief Brody from the Jaws when he was talking with the mayor. Something comes up, and his exact lines is, "I can do anything I want. I'm the chief of police." And then he walks out. You see throughout the episode, Hopper watching a very 80s TV show, started in 1982.
Oh, yes.
TV show of choice, and who it almost looks like he is trying to mimic.
No, he's totally styled after this, yes.
Magnum P.I. You can definitely tell that his inspiration is from Tom Selleck's person. He actually has someone deliver him a T-shirt, and that T-shirt is the exact same shirt from the Magnum P.I. TV show. Mm-hmm. And when he gets it, well, what did he say? This is cutting edge?
Yes.
Yeah.
Cutting edge.
Yeah.
This is the fashion for this year.
Yep. And then this... along with that, if you guys haven't noticed, there's actually been a lot of stuff blowing up about the acid wash jeans and the Magnum P.I. T-shirt, and people thinking it's the hottest dad look in the world, and everyone's looking to try to figure out where to buy these shirts now.
No.
That's not good.
No.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. So this episode, we also get a deeper look into the mall itself. You actually see them walking through, so you get to see the different stores and stuff. So even though Scoops Ahoy was never really a store, what's wrong?
Nothing. I'm just screwing
Even though
around
Scoops
in the
Ahoy
background.
is never really a show. Never really a store. You actually see other stuff like Orange Julius. Mm-hmm. The original Orange Julius sign. You see Sam Goody, Walden Books.
Walden Books,
and a few others. And like I said, when she walked into Professor Clark's room, is everything? What are you guys doing?
I don't know what he's doing.
Continue, dude. Just ignore what I'm doing.
He's listening to Weird Al Yankovic's My Baloney, which is a parody of My Sharona by The Knack.
Right.
My baloney.
Mm-hmm. They made a reference to, because they made a reference in a few references in season 2. They carried on the references for the Evil Dead series in this one.
Oh yeah.
You see Billy's arm is infected, and the way everything's happened is happening exactly like one of the Deadite poisonings, like what you saw before Ash cut his arm off.
Like in the Upside Down?
Yeah. I remember last time I did that, didn't I?
Call back.
Now, to go along with that song, On a Bicycle Built for Two, or Daisy, that was played by the horse. One of the reasons why that sounds so familiar, and the way it was portrayed, is actually they took it from 1960. What was it? 1960. I want to say 64. 2001 Space Odyssey.
Yeah.
Hal plays that tune in a very distorted way, almost like how they heard that in the back of the thing, and it almost sounded identical.
Fair enough.
And then, of course, the reference to Doc Brown by the Professor, with his miniature recreation of the town in his garage.
Yes,
His
indeed.
garage was also even set up almost the same way as the Doc Brown.
Yeah, I noticed that right when
Yeah.
she walked in. I was like,
Very nice callback.
It's Marty.
On that point. Mm-hmm.
and what's funny is that movie is actually playing at the movie theater, and people are like, why do they got to go back to the future? What does that even mean? I know that's probably like later on in a couple
Only a little bit,
episodes,
yeah.
but still, that
Yeah.
when that, I laughed so hard. Back to the Future, by the way, for everybody out there, is one of my favorite trilogies
It's one of the best.
of all time.
Nicholas, is that a wrap up for that? For your references?
Episode 2 references, for me, are complete.
Dun dun dun.
Very nice. And that wraps up our episode 1 and 2. Guys, chapter 3, The Case of the Missing Lifeguard. And the plot goes as such.
Where's Waldo? Oh, sorry.
Indeed. I don't know. 11 uses her powers to spy on Mike and later Billy. She sees Billy subduing Heather, and he senses 11's presence. So right here, Max and 11 are spending some quality girl time. Max talks her into spying on the boys. We see some funny, awkward shenanigans there. And then they decide to spy on Billy and see what he's been up to. And we see a disturbing scene where Billy is crouched down. We see Heather making some yelling sounds. It doesn't look good. And then suddenly Billy sees that 11 is looking. Like right at him. Like somehow they can sense her. Creepy. Moving on, Nancy finds out more about the rat's strange behavior, discovering reports of missing fertilizer and chemicals all over Hawkins. Good for you, Nancy Drew. Sorry, that was a mean joke thrown out by her co-workers, the men in said place. Returning to the Driscoll house, Nancy and Jonathan, here we go, find Ms. Driscoll eating fertilizer herself. She's looking very psychotic while eating it. Like, ugh. Anyway. Then, Max and 11 try to track down Billy, but fail to find him and Heather. They failed to find Billy and Heather at the pool. Will has a falling out with Mike and Lucas, frustrated by their preoccupation with girls. It's kind of a sad little note. The other friends have kind of all grown up, and Will's a little behind on this whole idea of, romance, twitterpation, what have you.
Right.
And he just wants to go back to the way things were. Dungeons and Dragons, let's be bros, be friends, and go back to the way we were. But, so they have a little bit of a falling out there. Meanwhile, Robin decodes the Russian communication, realizing that the Russians have a shipment arriving at Starcourt that night. Awkward. Also, Hopper is angry at Joyce for standing him up, but she convinces him that the magnets must have demagnetized due to an electromagnetic device at the abandoned lab. Hopper and Joyce go to the lab to investigate, but Hopper is attacked by none other than the Terminator. Sorry, a character known as Grigory, a Russian soldier, who is very Arnold Schwarzenegger-esque in his presentation. Dustin, Steve, and Robin spy on armed Russian soldiers receiving a shipment at Starcourt's loading dock. And finally, Max and 11 find Billy and Heather having dinner, with Heather's parents seemingly fine. After the girls leave, Billy and Heather knock out her parents, which Will senses. Will, he's disbanded, he's run off on his own, kind of by himself, upset at his buddies, but he senses something's going on. We see Billy and Heather literally knocking the crap out of her own dad and mom.
With a wine bottle.
Yeah, and then Dustin, Steve, and Robin are spying on some armed Russian soldiers right now. Things seem a little more serious at this point and juncture in the episode. I liked a lot of the back and forth and the unfolding of, oh snap, Heather is also possessed like Billy. What is their plan at this point? Like, that's kind of my unfolding thought at that moment. I really liked the episode. Before Nick throws out any culture references, did you have any medium opinions on it, Matthew? With where we're at here, armed soldiers, the possession plot seems to thicken at the end there.
So when Dustin and Steve figure out, like, thinking that it's Russians, right? They're all sitting there spying with their goggles, and they spy this guy that's blonde hair, having a duffel bag. And they're like, "Where's he?"
Describes what does a Russian look like. Steve says, "What does a Russian even look like?" And then Dustin starts describing, "Oh, blonde haired, white, probably carrying a duffel bag and looking suspicious." And then, yeah, like you were saying, this guy is just walking. He looks very stone cold and serious.
Yeah,
he's walking through.
His exact words were tall, blonde, not smiling.
Yeah, not smiling.
Not smiling.
So they follow him, and this guy walks into a room with a bunch of chicks in yoga pants, and then
spandex at the time, because yoga pants are really a thing.
Close enough. Spandex, and he sets his duffel bag down. Suddenly gets a real big grin on his face as he's unzipping the duffel bag, rips out a boombox,
and starts playing Wham.
For all you younger listeners out there, that is a cassette music player. It's pre-CD.
Yeah, and that that whole scene right there made me laugh so hard.
And he's like, what did he say? Something like, let's start...
It was...
I think it's jazzercise.
It's jazzercise.
Yeah. All right, ladies, let's start. Oh, wait, yeah.
Working at it and talking about gyrating your midsection, your hips. Start working those hips, ladies. And then they're immediately like, oh. They were caught off guard on that one.
Yes. But then you see Steve just like staring at the... Sorry. Anyways.
No, that was a fun moment for that episode. I agree.
But the moment that they started to figure out, when Robin figures out like the whole like message,
coded message,
which is the week is long, the silver cat feeds when blue meets yellow in the west. What is it? A trip to China sounds nice if you tread lightly. And then all of a sudden, like, you see it, like, her brain just, like, click on, like...
I'm just giving you a quick prop and shout out to Matthew. He's not reading any notes.
Oh, what? I'm
telling our listeners that you quoted that whole thing and that it wasn't written down anywhere. No. That's all. I don't have that written in my notes.
And
they did repeat it a lot, but I don't remember the quote.
You see it dawn on her, and like she's like, "Stay here, get the kids some freaking ice cream," and she like runs off, and you see her stand up in the middle of like the food court, and is like, da 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 da, and then that's when you see them lead to like the whole Russian being up on top of the roof, spying on the Russians because of what time it is.
Yeah. They pinpointed all that detail, yep. Alright, Nicholas.
Sorry, I didn't mean to...
No, dude. That's part of the fun of this whole breakdown. Nick, go ahead and throw us out some references for episode 3.
Episode 3 references. This reference was nice for the sheer fact that they finally touched on the fact that 11's not just a science experiment. She's a teenage girl.
Mm-hmm.
And they just went through this whole breakup. And they actually went back to the times where magazines had fold-out center posters. And she's looking at a picture of Ralph Macchio.
Mm-hmm.
Who all people know from the 80s was the Karate Kid.
Karate Kid.
Sorry.
And her and Max decided to spend a day at the mall, being girls, doing girl things, and trying on new clothes and trying to make Mike jealous. One of the things you see her do is when she's dressing up, she actually puts on the Karate Kid bandana with the sunburst thing. Yeah.
Yes.
Another call out was actually to one of Winona Ryder's movies from the 80s. She was in a movie called The Heathers. The reason why this is a call out, the first girl to die in this film and the first girl to die into this show name was Heather.
Barbara. Oh.
The season. Sorry.
Oh, I was like, Justice for
Heather.
Barbara?
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. You're right.
But is she dead?
You
Or
grabbed the
is she-
jazzercise for me. That was actually one of my messages there.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. That's perfectly fine. You know that when they're searching in Billy's room to try to find him, you find out that Billy is actually a pretty hardcore heavy metal fan. Because on his wall you have a poster for the album Filth Hounds of Hades, which is by the band Tank. Not many people know them, but they were big heavy metal back then. There was another call back to the movie Invasion of the Body Snatchers. One of the stores' name was Kaufman Shoes, which Philip Kaufman was the director in '78 of Body Snatchers. And it's funny you should say Nancy Drew. There's actually quite a few references in this episode for Nancy Drew
Oh, yes.
pertaining to Nancy.
Oh,
Yes.
irony.
One of the big things you can see is the episode title, The Case of the Missing Lifeguard. That harkens back to a very big style of Nancy Drew titles for her
The case
for her
of, yes.
books. Weird Al. You see another reference to Weird Al on Dustin's T-shirt. Yeah. And Castle Byers, where Will Byers is trying to say, "Hey, we need to just do D&D. Don't worry about the girls." All the magazines that are around him are Dragon magazines, which was original source for all the information for Dungeons and Dragons.
Right.
Absolutely.
Now, I'm surprised you didn't touch on something in the background where Billy and Heather are eating at Heather's parents' house.
Go
Which
on.
one?
Do you remember this? Do you remember the song that was playing in the background?
Not off the top of my head.
American Pie.
Yep.
We are jumping into Chapter 4, The Sauna Test. Now, in tradition of everything we've recorded up to this point, I'll read off the bullet points of this episode, and then I think it'd be best that we continue with the tradition of pointing out our favorite scene or part of these episodes, and then whatever Nick has for notes or memories on pop culture references for this episode, we'll jump to him on each episode. So, jumping into the plot, gentlemen, here we go. Chapter 4, The Sauna Test. Heather takes her parents to the mill. Now, this is the lifeguard working with Billy, where they are attacked by the creature. I don't remember that detail, but you know what? I'm not going to fuzz over things. We'll recap anything that we're unfamiliar with as we go forward.
Wait, what was that first part? Sorry, I zoned out.
Heather takes her parents to the mill where they're attacked by the creature.
Yeah.
I think that the parents were attacked by this creature that they offered her parents up to. You know what I mean? Like yeah.
She leans into her father and goes, "This will only take a moment. Just don't scream."
Yes.
It will hurt less.
Yeah, they tied her parents up. They brought her down into this mill, and they had this whole mind flayer creature that seems very physical in this season. They let that creature basically suck their faces off, essentially. We don't know what that means yet at this point. We're like still trying to figure it out. Meanwhile, Nancy and Jonathan are fired for harassing the old lady Driscoll, revealed to be a paranoid schizophrenic. Now, Nancy and Jonathan thought there was something up with the rats. Then they thought maybe she was weird and possessed. But they end up getting fired for it from the news place where they were working.
Well, that's Nicole's father.
Yeah,
he was taken at that point.
Heather's father. He was the head guy for this news reporting company, the newspaper company. Now, meanwhile, Will reveals his connection to the Mind Flayer to his boys Mike, Lucas, 11, and Max. He tells the gang, "Hey, I'm still connected to the Mind Flayer," basically. And this leads the group to speculate that the Mind Flayer still resides in the real world, and they think it has possessed Billy at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Now, moving forward through this episode, we've got Hopper and Joyce force Klein to reveal that Grigori, the Terminator character here, works for the owners of Starcorp, who have bought up additional abandoned properties all around Hawkins. Klein later alerts Grigori that Hopper and Joyce are planning to search for the properties, and this is the mayor. Klein is the mayor of the town.
Mr.
Played by
Carey
Carey
Ellis.
Ellis.
Yep.
In stereo.
Yep. Full surround for all you. He knows Russians are involved, but he tries to stay out of the details. And Hopper obviously is very pissed off at the mayor for allowing these sort of things to happen in their town. So while all of this is being revealed at Starcourt, we've got Dustin, Steve, and Robin enlist Lucas's sister Erica, bless her soul, to break into the storeroom, discovering it is an elevator when they are trapped inside as it takes them down below the mall. We'll bust into some scenes about her because I think we all were entertained by Lucas's young sister in this scene. Let's finish up. We got 2 more bullet points.
Okay.
Still suspicious, Nancy goes to visit Driscoll at the hospital after old lady Mrs. Driscoll was taken to the hospital. While the kids, meanwhile, the kids trap Billy in the pool sauna to confirm that he's possessed. Because remember, they learned that the Mind Flayer hates heat, and that's how in the last season they got the Mind Flayer's presence to leave Will by overheating Will's body.
Right.
So, in conclusion, the last plot point for this episode, Billy gains seemingly superhuman strength. He breaks free from the sauna. Also, Nancy witnesses Mrs. Driscoll similarly transforming, like she breaks out of her restraints in the hospital. And Billy regroups with Heather at the mill, where dozens of other townspeople have been possessed. So,
Yes.
real quick, before we get into pop culture references, Nick, let's talk real quick, not too long a time. Let's take our favorite scenes out of episode 4 and kind of just explain them a little bit, kind of express what we liked about them. So, I'll go first, just to kick things off. For me, I think one of my favorite scenes was when they first when Dustin, Steve, and Robin tried recruiting Erica, Lucas's younger sister, who is sassy as all get out, has this attitude we've never seen before. Suddenly she becomes kind of like a new character in this season. And they're like, hey, there's this vent we're trying to climb in through to infiltrate this Russian compound. None of us can fit it, but hey, this barely 12-year-old girl, you're small enough. And they try to bribe her with all the different treats at the Chips Ahoy ice cream place where Robin and Steve work. And she makes some very outlandish demands where she's like, if I'm going to do this, you're going to guarantee me a lifetime supply of everything on the menu. And they basically tell her, they promise her that. And before she gets really into it and when she realizes things are kind of serious, little Miss Erica points out the fact that she feels like this is child endangerment. And she decides to repeatedly remind them of this as they get into their antics. That was one of my favorite scenes. You guys can either agree or point out a different scene. Nick or Matt, what was one of your favorite parts of this episode?
That one was actually one of my favorites too, because with her talking, she's all like sitting there going, at first they're like, we'll give you like a free scoop every day for like 2 weeks. And then she's like, I don't really need you. You need me.
Right.
And then she talks about the child endangerment thing, and then
she tries to up the ante, which she said everything for free, whatever she wants on the menu, basically at that point.
Oh, she's a hustler.
Yes.
Major hustler. It's like she was this annoying sister in season 2, and we don't know much about her, and all of a sudden she's got all these cojones, demands, and perspective about what she understands. I can get away with this. They need me.
Exactly. And like the whole time though, like she's always going into Chips Ahoy throughout those first 3 episodes, asking for free samples.
That was my other favorite part, Matthew. just to echo what you're pointing out here. Yeah, like every day she would come to that store and demand the free sample that they promise their customers. And she got sassy.
And then later on, when she's like saying that she can't figure out how to open up the door, and then she just stands there and just pushes the button.
Those interactions were so good. Nick, did you have an agreeance or an alternative favorite part of that episode?
That was actually one of my favorite scenes, but my favorite would actually have to be the sauna test scene, where they're in the sauna. Ooh. This is where you actually get to see Billy kind of finally give in to the mind flare, completely and utterly. There's no holding back anymore, and he gets pissed, and he almost has like this Wolverine awakening moment. You know what I mean? He
kind of became possessed in that moment.
Oh yeah.
Like, well, yeah, overtaken. Yeah.
With that whole thing though, it's like they're all connected at the same time. So when him and Mrs. Driscoll were yelling out at the same time, she was basically giving her string and back and forth kind of a thing. That's how he was able to open up the door.
I can agree with that. There was a synchronization with the Mind Flayer taking over all these different citizens of Hawkins, where Billy was kind of the catalyst in this season for the Mind Flayer, but all these other people that were also affected by the Mind Flayer also seemed like a hive mind. They all seemed to kind of react or like at the same time.
But he wasn't a drone like the other ones.
He wasn't what? No.
Wasn't a drone.
Well, no, and that's what I mean by catalyst. And I know that's what you're pointing out, Nick, is that he was like, for whatever reason, Billy had enough darkness in him that the Mind Flayer was drawn to use him as like the primary host. At least that's kind of what we gather based on these scenes that played out. Like that's kind of what I theorized about by seeing this play out.
Yes, I agree with that.
And like I said in the past with this, this is very reminiscent of Lost Boys.
Mm-hmm.
So this moment also reminded me of when the main good guy character finally changes vampire and lets it unleash. That same kind of look as he looks through the doorway was very similar to this.
And can I also point out in this episode, this, for all his comings and goings and shortcomings and positives, as far as Hopper is concerned, this is at this point in the season, this is one of these turning points where I'm like, he goes from, don't get me wrong, he's always veered off from the books of the law, but this is kind of a point in the series where he kind of just basically declares on a personal level and in front of Joyce and to the audience that at this point he doesn't give a shit anymore. He wants to get down to the truth. And this is where he starts threatening the mayor of the town and starts asking him to reveal what's really going on, because this mall came out of nowhere and it's affecting small businesses, but more than that, Hopper can see the shady aspects about this mall, and he's not even talking to the kids right now. He sees there's something going on. Matt slams a fist into his palm because Matt knows what I'm talking about here. And he just he goes ham at this point in the season on the frickin' mayor. And Joyce
breaks his damn nose.
And Joyce is not even
twice.
Here's the thing, like Joyce, Winona Ryder, right here, is playing I love her. She's used to all the crazy shit that happened in season 2. So at this point, nothing is really shocking her. She also wants to get to the truth, and she's not ready to get into a relationship again, but we all have to admit, as an audience, Hopper is turning her on here, and she's along for the ride. Let's be honest. She's not even questioning Hopper at this point. She's not stopping him like, "Oh, you just punched the mayor in the face." Joyce is just, at this point, she's not even questioning Hopper. She's not ready to get into a relationship, but she's completely fine with Hopper's aggressive nature at trying to get to the point. She's worried about she's worried about her own kids. She's worried about what's really going on around her in the town. And she's like, you know what? The only person willing to figure this out is Hopper right now, and he's taking action. Screw it. And she lets it happen. She's like, remember when she was distracting the secretary and Hopper goes in there and has a one-on-one with the mayor? And she's just like, no, I guess we're leaving now. And she just goes out with him and the mayor in hostage. She doesn't even question it. Anyway, that's where we're at with those two. And that was the second, like, I wanted to point that out. Like, I'm kind of excited about that. And, like, how much of a nod were the Duffer Brothers making when they put out this freaking Russian actor, Grigory, and making him straight up freaking the Terminator in this whole thing. Like, ruthless killer who's obviously keeping things hidden from the common folk, and he's the one going in and talking to the mayor. Hopper's like, who is this guy, right? You know, and I love the references because the Terminator was early 90s and all that, and there's so many references to that.
First Terminator was 1984.
1984. And we got signs for it. We pointed out some pop culture references even at the beginning of this breakdown. Episode 1 or 2, Nick, I think you pointed out, we saw a sign for Terminator, among other things, because this season launches in the summer of '85. Was that right? which is crazy.
Yep.
Right? Because for me, because guys, I know Matt was already almost a year old at this point. Me, I was only born 3 months prior to the beginning of this show. So February of '85, and Nick a little after that, right? A little bit. Anyway, anything else, guys? Anything else that stands out before we move on? Any other favorite moments before I asked Nick to give me any pop culture references? Because we kind of made some of those already. The Terminator and all that. Anything else, Matthew or Nick, on plot points that stood out?
Not really.
I mean, there's a lot we could really go at length on, honestly, if we were to do an episode by episode breakdown. But for the sake of time and everything, we'll keep moving on. Nick, were there any, to your recollection, any major references other than the Terminator for Chapter 4?
Yes. There is a scene that has 11 and what's her face? Max?
Yes.
Max.
Yes.
11 and Max, they're sleepover. They're talking and doing their thing, and Max pulls out some comic books to show her.
Yes.
And it kind of frustrates me. I actually owned these comic books. It was in the collection I got from my uncle.
Or did.
Yeah. What?
I'm sorry. Go on. Go on.
I actually owned.
Go on.
But I sold them because I was short on some.
I know. I was trying not to bring that up. Go on.
And the issue she had, Wonder Woman number 326, is most known for because it was the first issue for a series called Tropiador Heat. It's a big island excursion thing that they were trying to figure out. And then Green Lantern 185. The importance of that is it was actually the first comic book that went into the backstory of John Stewart.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh.
Yeah. And those were both. The Wonder Woman one was released in July of '85, and the other one was released in May.
Right.
Of '85. So it's right in the right time period. So those would have been very close there.
Yes.
And we were talking about the Terminator connection. There's actually in that scene that we were just talking about between Hopper and the mayor, where they actually say Mayor Klein jokes that he was attacked by Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, there was a very direct reference there.
Yeah. We have another reference to a popular show that a lot of us lovingly remember from our kids, from our child ages. When they're trying to get into the vents to actually start exploring, and they're pushing her up in there, beforehand, before they realized that they were going to get the little girl in there, Dustin. Yeah, Dustin. They were talking about
Steve,
Dustin.
Robin.
Dustin's ability to bend into bizarre shapes, and he said he's like Gumbo, and Robin makes the correction. You mean Gumby? Which we all know is a very popular green claymation character with his.
I grew up watching
red
that
horse.
old school claymation. They called it claymation back in the day.
Oh yeah.
I heard about that.
Towards the end,
stuck. Sorry.
Yep.
Old school, Matthew. Old school. So good.
Towards the end of the show, of the episode, there is a scene that you see all the Mind Flayer drones walking towards the screen.
Is that when it happened? That scene?
I'm pretty sure.
I'm not trying to correct you. I just am trying to remember if that was where it happened. Right? We're talking about some melting situations.
Well, it's
Or
towards
not
that
quite.
scene, yeah.
Not quite.
Towards the scene where they all do that. But they have this happen, and during this scene, it plays in the song. I know the song thing is usually the Matt thing, but that's
usually fine. Matt. It's been a minute. It's been a minute since we got.
They
to
play
this
the song, 1939 Vera Lynn song called "We'll Meet Again Someday,"
Oh yeah, they play that during the whole part where Billy like starts running away,
Mhm.
and he looks back at Max, and that's when it goes, "We'll meet again." Yeah. Anyways.
Yeah, and it
Yeah.
cuts into the part where the
Props,
people are
props.
walking towards the screen, where this is kind of a callback. This is a callback to Stanley Kubrick's Doctor Strangelove series when the nuclear explosions are happening. So this is basically saying shit is going down.
Yeah. Right.
Another thing is during that scene when you see all the drones, I'm gonna call them,
That's fine. Yeah.
you see a harken back to another band from that a punk rock band from that time. One of the people, he's got long hair and he's wearing a Dead Kennedys shirt.
Which means what?
It's a punk rock band, Dead Kennedys.
I know.
That was really
I know,
popular during that time.
I know.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. Sorry. Try to be on the nose. My bad.
Yeah, that's all right. I'll forgive you.
Dead
I'm not
Kennedys.
sure. I'm not sure our viewers will. I mean,
Hopefully those listening will forgive me.
all right. And I'm like I said, I'm only giving 3 for each episode. So
That's fine. If we go any more, it might be an overwhelmingly long deep dive. Which, on a side note, guys,
I trimmed up my notes a lot, actually.
leave a comment. And Nick does that. Guys, leave a comment down below if you want super deep dives, because we are capable of doing so. But that being said, let's jump into the next one, shall we, guys?